This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the top 14 of website builders. Imagine for a second, right? You are Mike Tindall and starting a brand new league for rugby. But you need a website to promote that league, a beautiful website, a glorious website that looks professional and draws people in, makes people want to join your league. And if everything else about your league is anything to go by, you only have a few minutes to assemble it. Squarespace, in that case, is your friend. In mere minutes, you can build a beautiful and professional website with their new AI tools, helping speed the process up even faster. Squarespace can assemble a gorgeous website for you and with you and indeed by you in mere moments, yet you could keep tweaking it for years and years and dig deeper into their features. And if you want to get started building a site for league or any other reasons, you too can produce a website that looks professional and excellent extremely quickly by heading to the link in the description and using the offer code SQUIDGRUGBY to save yourself some money. The history of rugby union football often reads almost like a copy-paste of another book on the history of bullet holes in shoe leather. The sport's continued relative popularity is honestly a miracle considering the catalogue of seismic errors born out of staggering greed and regular self-interest of a small handful in charge who would alone prosper from the decision in question, time after time after time. Whether it's the great schism leading the creation of rugby league, amateurism allowing the NFL to kill the sport just as it was gaining a foothold in America, 40 years of the IRB saying no to proposals for a World Cup, or even welcoming in nations like Italy, Romania, Japan and Argentina to vote and be part of the game. It's a sport that continuously prioritised those at the top over those who love it. And so, how refreshing then that last week, 8 of the 11 Tier 1 nations signed a letter making a clear stance against the latest attempt to demolish the game's own Birkenstocks. Because there's been a term taking up a growing number of column inches in the rugby pages over the last few months. R360. For those who aren't aware, R360 is a proposed breakaway league overseen by your two favourite rugby figures, Mike Tindall and Stuart Hooper. Former players agent Mark Spores, a man once described by Andy Good as about as useful as a chocolate teapot, which is like being called a philistine by an empty bookcase, and a shadowy cabal of mostly anonymous money men, but amongst them a number of the universally beloved Saudi figures responsible for Live Golf, your favourite golf league. Now, R360 have put nothing out detailing the plan officially, so you likely may need some details filling in. So here's their plan, right? Their grand vision is to revolutionise rugby union, to overthrow the current standing and build something new in the place of the current club game. They picture this as basically creating the World 7 Series, a programme that loses around $30 million for World Rugby every single year, but for 15s. The plan is to expand down the road, but their first season, set to definitely be on October 2nd, 2026, will have 6 men's teams and 4 women's teams. This gives you 3 men's fixtures and 2 women's fixtures a week. All of these will take place in the same stadium over one weekend. Presumably 3 on the Saturday, 2 on the Sunday. I'm filling that bit in, I'm assuming that myself. Each round will take place in a different city, a different continent. Current plan appears to be 1 in London, 1 in Dubai, 1 in Miami, Tokyo, Boston, Cape Town, Lisbon, and Madrid. 8 rounds in 8 cities. The teams will be nominally named after those various world cities, or at least 6 out of the 8, but have no real ties to them. Players will be signed for the league, not for a team. A players' draft will then take place in July before the first fixture in October. The coach of each team will then take it in turns to draft a player from a centralised pool of lads and ladies who agreed to sell their eternal soul to Mike Tindall. As such, we may yet see a Tokyo team, say, without a single Japanese player, or a home crowd in Cape Town confused when they turn up and the side they're cheering on is entirely Argentine. Players will have no say who they play for. A guy who's never been to the USA could find himself easily drafted to represent Boston or Miami. This is their proposal. This is their pitch. And supposedly, they have a lot of money behind it. Now, there are bits of this that I don't hate. Bits of this I think could be quite fun, right? A travelling rugby roadshow in Barbar's mould of teams playing batshit basketball score rugby could definitely be a lot of fun. Scheduled city by city alongside a regular season and provide a cool means of getting some guys coming towards the end of their career or left languishing by rugby's recent addiction to killing club teams opportunities to play across the world. Like a global barbarian league. Building it, essentially, as indeed a 15s version of the World 7 Series, which loses World Rugby an estimated $30 million a year. Instead, however, R360's pitch is to essentially replace the entire current structure of rugby union, to dismantle a game as it currently exists and replace it with that, to replace it with a handful of games in Dubai and Tokyo and wherever else. And so this brings us up to last week, as every Tier 1 nation bar Wales, Argentina and Japan said any players who sign with R360 will be banned from playing Test rugby, playing any international for their nation. In the days since, it's come out the referees who make the jump will also take the chance of suspension from World Cups and even Test matches in general, and more recently, the NRL, having had a lot of rugby league players being targeted as well, have gone in even harder. If you sign for an R360 team, you risk a 10-year ban from playing in rugby league's top competition. Now, in the likely event this all falls apart over the course of the next 3 months, Tindall and others responsible for this league will no doubt spend the rest of their lives claiming the same bollocks they've already begun to pipe into ear holes. The rugby establishment tore our attempt to save the game apart out of fear or reluctance to see the future. They couldn't look forwards. Tindall, Hooper, et al. Will no doubt point to the sort of greed and self-interest that's led to unions self-immolating so many times before as exactly what's happening this time as the league falls apart. And I think it's important to make this clear right now, from the beginning, before the Jenga Tower collapses. R360 is not going to fail because the union stepped in. It's going to fail because it's a steaming pile of woofed up dog shit. In order to join an R360 team, right, players would be ripped away from the current club structure and now the current international structure. They wouldn't be dual registered with, say, the Northampton Saints and the Dubai human rights offences. They'll be solely signed up to an R360 team, or indeed just to the league, and then drafted to teams individually. R360's goal appears to be to replace the Prem, URC, JLO, Super Rugby, and various other pro leagues across the globe. Those teams may continue to exist in an R360 world, but essentially they'll be feeder sides to Mike Tindall's global dream machine. All the best guys be bought out by Saudi money to go and play for the Lisbon Salted Fish instead of turning out for the club they grew up dreaming of playing for. Officially, none of the teams would be from their named location. The London Lap Dancers wouldn't be an RFU English team. All sides would instead be registered with the UAE Rugby Union, an organisation who made the WAU look professional. Early this year, right, they forgot to renew their official website's domain name and it now belongs to a betting company. These will all be teams with no history, no fans, not registered in the locations they claim to represent, with players that don't even live there. Players will be free to live in the country of their choosing and just fly over for competitions. The current club structure, essentially, right, works because if you're, say, a Kiwi who opts to go and play for Bordeaux, you're going to have to move to that town, or at least very nearby, to commute into training. It becomes your home, so you represent your new home. And the people who live there alongside players who grew up dreaming of wearing the badge, having stood in those stands as a teenager. It's how living anywhere works, the melting pot of cultures of most major cities boiling down into their sports team. R360 does away with this, essentially creating 6 random groups of players with a location slapped on afterwards. Not only is there no history, there's no culture. To demonstrate how this works, right, let's just do a quick case study. To pick a player who's been linked to the league at random, let's say Jack Morgan gets an offer for $8 gazillion to leave Welsh Rugby behind, and who could blame him, and he decides to take it. He'd sign a contract, and then in July next year, watch a live stream where Jake White, Eddie O'Sullivan, Wayne Pivac, and whichever all-star coaching talent they manage to secure, each pick names out of a hat. He then gets selected by Graham Roundtree to go and play for the Tokyo Animes, a city he may well never visited before and have no say in representing. However, he can then continue living in Brynaman in West Wales and just fly out for tournaments. Just fly out to Dubai, meet his teammates there, and then fly home, presumably. This is 8 weekends a year, and he may well be banned from playing for Wales. Players from, say, Finn Smith did this as a random English example, as another player's been linked, he would be banned from playing for England. Meaning that if their teams don't make the semis, these 2 incredible talents that people want to watch play will take part in just 6 games a year. And that's assuming they aren't rotated out. The rest of the time, Finn's just going to be going for a jog around Northampton, and Jack's just going to be lifting some weights, daydreaming of back in the day when he'd be spotted by Harry Deaves. This approach almost entirely cuts every important aspect of rugby that doesn't involve play on the field. Teammates barely spend any time together, right? Maybe other than the odd flight across nations. Even if he's flown out for the odd training camp a week or 2 at a time to Tokyo, there's no chance to properly get to know your teammates, no permanent training base, no real social side to the game. On the field, there's no real bond to the team or players around you, no history, no growing up dreaming of playing for the Cape Town Edna Modes. Nobody's gone through a decade of hurt, missing out on the semis that propels you onto even greater heights in the game. Rugby is an inherently emotional sport. Carrying, tackling, getting back up the floor requires you to play with an emotional edge. Tindall et al. Are looking to strip the emotion out of the game, the feeling from every moment, and replace it with dollar signs. So what you get instead, right, even in the best case scenario that Mike Tindall dreams about every single night, is superstars who have barely trained together, in some cases scarcely met, had no time to work on a proper advanced game plan, and have no emotional connection to the team or their teammates. Essentially, what you get is 2 barbarian sides playing each other, but without the freedom and inherent license to play those black and white shirts unlock in players who grew up watching that side on TV, watching highlights of Gareth Edwards scoring for them. Think back to that frankly quite tedious game between the Box and Barbars a few months ago, but if both sides with that Stars Barbarian Hungarian team who looked bored out of their skull the entire 80 minutes. Because if coaches get no time with their players because they're living across the world and having to come into training on Zoom, complicated and exciting game plans can't be worked on. Great attacking patterns can't be worked out. The first year or so will likely result in simple, easy to execute rugby, and by that I mean forward oriented, heavy kicking, lots of box kicking rugby, because the prize money will likely be so huge, but the time together to train so tiny. It'll lead to loads of teams just booting the lever off it. That's inevitably what it's going to be. It's going to be really dull rugby or a much lower standard defence, because we're not seeing that. The setup is inherently flawed. The best coaches won't want to go to a league where they don't get any time with their players. They'll just be there for the money, as will their chargers, who won't be fighting for the badge, fighting for the teammate next to them, because they've only just met them. This could still have some entertainment value if you got big names in, but the ban on test rugby puts paid to that. If you're Bowden Barrett, right, even having played in 3 World Cups and won 1, would you give it the chance to attend a 4th a year out to parade around mostly empty stadiums, likely hanging high balls? Even if the pay increase is lovely, you've got to ask the question, haven't you? I, for the record, don't disparage any player taking the money and prioritising their future and family. It's a short career, and I'm already dreading the semi-inevitable social media witch hunt for players who do break rank and chase the cash. We currently, as a society, live in hell, and if one season with the Miami Dolph Lundgrams can set you up for an easier life after you retire, go do it. It's fine. As such, a handful will likely take the chance, and quite a few more will in the women's game, where this kind of pay bump is very much needed. But I kind of doubt there'll be enough superstars to fill 6 full squads. And whilst I reckon there will be a few players who make this jump if it does go ahead, the chances it'll be enough to fill 6 full superstar squads that will sell out stadiums the world over, I highly doubt. In fact, I doubt there'll be enough starter signings for just 1 squad. I'd currently give the league maybe a 15% chance of actually going ahead and about 1% odds of being a success, but I'd wager if it does, the average squad won't look like Sia Khaleesi, Ardy Surveyor, Antoine Dupont, Finn Russell, Kieran Williams, the squad I know that looking for. It looks something more like this for me, right? A few journeymen who won caps back in the 2010s. Let's say Luke Hamilton and Caleb Timu, a bunch of decent players you've heard of but aren't exactly superstars, for whom this is a huge pay jump. Let's say Angus O'Brien, Leon O'Cronier, and an anonymous but class Kiwi team in every single team who proves to be their best player game on game. A 7 superstar or 2 who've never previously made a splash in 15s but are going to give it a go. An Argentine and or a Fijian who no one's heard of but turns out to be incredible at this lower level and doesn't cut it in the test game. A couple of rugby league converts who cause your friend who follows 13 aside to laugh when you ask if they're any good. And one big name who was planning to retire or has fallen out of favour but went, you know what, why not, and signed on for 1 year. James Slipper, your time has come. Let's be honest, right? Would you fly to Boston to watch that lot play? Would you even tune in on TV if there's a Premiership or URC game on the other side? Never mind the top 14. I'm not saying the captain of the 2011 England team and the coach who led Bath to their worst season in history don't know how to build a captivating rugby project, but look, as a Welsh fan, I'm just going to say I'm pretty familiar with what bad rugby administration looks like from the outside, and R360 stinks worse than James Haskell's jockstrap. The league's official request for ratification by World Rugby was rejected just over a month ago because so many of the questions that the International Governing Board needed answering in order to approve a league were left open and unanswered. There were no stadiums listed, no doctors, no credentials, no medical or safety facilities listed or provided. Tindall, when discussing this, has repeatedly cast this off as minutiae, as tiny, as details that aren't really important. But I'm not sure if I was a player or an administrator within World Rugby, I'd really want to be placing trust in someone who views player safety as a bit of a you'll be fine. I'll do it on the night. Likewise, right? I just want to bring this up. Every time this is raised, Tindall makes this point.
We have been pleased to provide over 100 pages of information to World Rugby.
So you hand in 150 pages of paper.
Over 100 pages.
150 pages of paper.
Like writing out 100 pages of documentation was a huge effort. And look, I'm sure it was. I'm sure it took him at least half an hour. But you know what else is a huge effort? Running a professional sports league. There's this deeply unserious nature around so much of the public communication we're getting from R360. Tindall seems to consistently cast off the idea that proper work should go into making this a thing, into replacing the entire structure of the sport. Oh, we wrote 100 pages. Oh, well, that should be enough. It's kind of entitlement. Filling out 100 pages of documentation isn't a huge statement on how hard you're working. It's what it takes to pull this off. It should be the bare minimum. If I was trying to start a rugby league, I'd expect to write several hundred pages beyond just that of documentation. I'd expect to be writing contracts way beyond this. Complaining about how hard you're working whilst not even doing that bare minimum, not even hitting the standards you're required, is frankly how teenagers behave. R360's sales pitch projects they'll bring in $275 million in revenue over their first season. And frankly, this doesn't add up from countless ends. I might be missing something. I'm not a proper business person. Maybe I should have asked Steve Walsh. But one, right? They expect the TV rights to be worth more than any other domestic league in the world bar the top 14, despite the fact it's just 33 games as opposed to the 151 of the URC season or the 3,408 of the top 14 season, in a league nobody has ever watched, made up that morning by Stuart Hooper. They're also claiming the thing will be on free-to-air TV, at least in the UK, to grow interest. Now, that's all well and good, but they're looking for a huge chunk of their income to come from TV rights, right? And the American, Spanish and Portuguese markets are unlikely to be throwing huge amounts at a sport there's little demand for in a league no one's heard of, there's no history they can hang it on. And nations who don't have a team are probably unlikely to be queuing up to throw cash at it. Seeing as the only other traditional rugby nation to leverage for big broadcast deals is South Africa, who don't exactly boast the strongest economy to wage your wares on, the majority of the broadcast money will need to come from the United Kingdom. And in order to hit the projections and promise of free-to-air, R360 would need the BBC and or ITV to not just spare their precious airtime for 12 or so hours each weekend, but to pay more for their bullshit made-up league than they currently do for the Six Nations. In other words, it's not going to happen. However, the truly alarming part of their business plan, right, is the estimate that 180 million of their first year's revenue is going to come from ticket sales. So, the rumour stadiums, for argument's sake, they're the ones on screen now. Some of these, they may go for a different one of these cities, or they may change cities as they go, but we're going to go with it being these for the sake of argument, have a combined capacity for the full 8 rounds of 433,800. If they sell out every single seat, and that would involve shifting 71,000 in Madrid for a competition no one's heard of in a sport no one in the town cares about, the average ticket to make this amount of money would have to cost £414.94, right? And that's before you factor in any potential cut for the venue if they go down that route. Even assuming that a big chunk of this will come from corporate box experiences and what have you, that's still likely upwards of £300 for the average punter ticket. And that's before you weigh in the cost of flying to Dubai, a hotel, food. Tindall's pitch is this new league is designed to bring in new fans, to expand the game to people who've never watched the sport before, or just catch the old Six Nations game every year and never engage with the club game. And you have to ask the question, who in hell is taking a punt on something that could cost $5,000 to attend during a cost of living crisis? The 22nd in line to the throne is desperate to have you think that he speaks for the average fan, or the little guy who doesn't watch rugby, the average punter in the street. But the truth is, at least in the nation Tindall is one plane crash away from ruling, the audience rugby would be targeting, if it ever truly wanted to expand within it, would be those of us for whom $5,000 is a borderline life-changing amount of money. Instead, this proposal threatens to tear the game even further away from the working class fan base the game has excluded and spat on for generations, and in the process now also take the game away from most of the working middle class audience that's kept it afloat for decades. It's been rugby union's core audience, called bread and butter, for generations. Make no mistake, this is not an attempt to grow the game. It's an attempt to increase the money being made by the game. Fewer fans will attend, fewer fans will watch, and fewer fans will show interest in R360 in the current league model, balked though it is, but those handful of fans will spend more. And that's what really matters to those involved in setting up the league. And yet, critically, right, that money will not be reinvested. It's going straight into the pockets of Tindall, Hooper, and that shadowy cabal behind them. One term spotted in the documentation by those in the press who've seen it say that the top will be paid for their involvement even if the league never happens, for their time spent filling out forms wrong. At the minute, right, when you buy a ticket to go watch Cardiff or Bristol or Bordeaux or Benetton or the Queensland Reds, a chunk of that money will always be spent being reinvested into the game, going to the unions involved in running it. The national union have an obligation to run the grassroots level, to fund lower league rugby, to make sure clubs can afford to keep going and rugby can be a hobby for all below the international game, to support age grade sides, make sure that kids, wherever they are, can find a local rugby club and pick up a ball and play the game, creating those future internationals. Current pro clubs further invest in local talent scouting and coaching. Many run minis events or host schools tournaments, helping raise the level of rugby in the area, sending coaches out to local age grade teams. R360 will offer none of this, not a jot of it. The profit made will just sit in the bank account of some dude who could already buy your house several thousand times over. This is where the pyramid begins to collapse, right? Let's just go with the Tindall projection and say this league works. It takes off. It captures the public imagination. Millions are clamouring for those £300 tickets. In order to have those star names, in order for them to be established enough to be worth the $1 million price tag they're offering to pay, in order to keep the steady stream of big names coming through in a league, they're going to need to first come through the traditional pathway. Having names big enough to bring eyes into your phony league is all well and good, but in trying to replace that current framework and pocket the money for yourself instead of reinvesting it in the lower level of the pyramid, R360 has a natural shelf life. The fact I haven't had a week off in 4 years tells you there's already too much rugby on the calendar, and so every eyeball on this league takes money and attention away from the teams that do reinvest and do build the next generation, speeding up the climb towards the Premiership, URC, etc., becoming feeder leagues to R360. The future that Tindall et al. Want. Except if that does happen, more and more teams will begin to collapse as the money going in shrinks, as the fans turning up shrink. I mean, few of them come. I don't mean they go through a Honey I Shrunk the Kids situation. But that would be very funny, lead to a lot of scrum halves. The investment falls, the quality drops, the number of players coming through decreases, possibly drastically. The game kind of grinds to a bit of a halt. The standard drops slowly over the course of the next few years. It's like if the WOU were to run the entirety of World Rugby. Except though, it isn't the entirety of World Rugby. As a globe-trotting premier destination Grand Prix style league, you'd think, right? Paris would be a no-brainer. A country that's rugby mad, a city on billions of bucket lists with multiple high-grade stadia. And yet, there are absolutely no plans to stretch R360 to France, instead focusing on Spain and Portugal for a pretty clear reason, right? They know they can't compete with the top 14. That league is everything R360 isn't. Storied, quality, historic, competitive, packed with passionate fans every single week, and critically, real. It's an actual league that exists outside of a PDF on Stuart Hooper's desktop. And interestingly, there's also no team in New Zealand or Australia, yet their players are still being targeted. The real answer for why you'd leave out NZ is pretty simple, right? Eden Park isn't big enough. The New Zealand market isn't big enough, because ultimately that's what matters to this lot. It's not the game, it's not growing the game, it's not making the game more competitive, it's the profit margins at the end. It might not be all bad. If Live Golf's anything to go by, the whole thing might become so universally despite Adam Sandler decides to make a sequel to Billy Madison about what a shit idea it is. I've spoken to quite a number of people about this over the last few months, and I'm yet to meet a fan who genuinely is in favour of the idea. I put up a poll to kind of canvass opinion, and the results were both conclusive and frankly much closer than I expected. Around 5% want this to happen, 65% vehemently against. Because ultimately, the clue was in the name. A 360 just takes you back to exactly where you were before. This isn't a brand new, exciting version of the game. It's exactly the same bollocks that's been strapping the game down and sucking it of the life that fans and players imbue it with on a weekly basis that we've seen over and over for the last 200 years. Tindall might have only married into the royal family, but he's got the historic, centuries-old knack for deciding the thing that's best for the nation is the thing that best lines my pockets down to pat. R360 is the latest attempt by those empowered to strip rugby union of its soul, and they're only with a shot of doing it because so many of their predecessors have been so successful in breaking it down brick by brick and selling it off, or smashing it up for their own personal gain. Think the French and English clubs killing the old Hiding Cup format so they get a bigger slice of the pie. The greed and classism that led to the great split to the rugby league in the first place. And frankly, the entire notion that rugby union is a posh sport created by and for posh boys is a formalised version of the folk game that's existed in working class communities across the world for centuries. R360 is the latest attempt to convince us our game needs saving by some twat in a suit. But the best thing is, the way to beat it this time is easy. We don't need to be in the boardrooms or even marching in the streets to stop this. We just need to turn up in the stands. Buy a ticket to watch your local professional club. Go along and sit in the stands and cheer on the guys and girls who grew up dreaming of pulling on that badge. Or at least moved that community and took part in it. Go cheer, engage, enjoy it. Because this game truly belongs to those of us who love it, not those who want to profit off it. Thanks for watching that. I hope you enjoyed it. There has been a little bit of a break since the end of the World Cup. We're going to be back into full swing very soon. After this, I apologise, it's gone down a slightly different road, but I think it's worth covering. I also want to say for the record, right, that I am fully ready to be wrong. If this turns out to be brilliant, by all means, superb. I'm just looking at the information in front of me, going on my own instincts and going what I own, what I value about the game and about the world in general, and this stinks to me.
We're sceptical, we can say that much, but I would love for it to work out, because I like it when more things are good about rugby.
Absolutely. So, on the record, right, there's plenty more to come. We're going to have a look at a bunch of stuff coming up for the Autumn Internationals. We're going to go through some things, aren't we?
Yeah, we're going to talk about a bit of rugby, a bit of union, a bit of code, a bit of sport.
Good, alright. See you for more rugby.
Very political, that.
Yeah.
But could happen.
Might happen.
Might happen. Should do. Probably. Maybe.
Don't say anything until it's firmed up.
I agree with you.
Don't confirm.
We've proved in rugby before where you speak about the bright lights of a big city and then it doesn't
or you launch it and it blows up within 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Like Rugby X, the 10s, the 12s, The sevens,
13s,
13s,
9s.
sevens.
Yeah.